Byron Tuck with Simon Energy Associates, LLC, Midland, Texas.
Kimberly Smith with TalkTexasOil.
Excellent. Thank you for joining the program here today. Let's talk a little bit about some 1031s, how that plays into the whole oil and gas world. We're in 2021 now, so I know we're going to have all kinds of new different codes and laws and all kinds of things. So how are you guys doing today?
Well, the Code Section 1031 of the Internal Revenue Code deals with like-kind exchanges, and they've been popular in the oil and gas industry for many years. You've seen it in all aspects of the industry, not only producing, non-producing, but leasehold, so forth. And with the recent changes in the tax law, where only real property now qualifies for the like-kind or tax-free exchange, oil and gas has become even more important as an alternative for, say, real estate transitioning, trying to temporarily shelter a gain for a while. So it's quite common, and there are many qualified intermediaries out there that can help real estate or oil and gas firms that want, or individuals that want to engage in a like-kind exchange. And we have seen it with mineral owners selling their minerals and doing a like-kind exchange for additional farmland, or ranchers leasing their ranch and using the leasehold by the neighbor off, the bonus off the leasehold in a tax-free exchange. And of course, it's constantly changing, and we don't know what the government's going to do on any new tax laws, this new administration. But it has been quite popular, and I think we'll continue to see that.
And I think what we're wanting the oil and gas community to know is that people may be trading now, or they may be thinking of trading and releasing a property, and they don't have to feel like someone's going to come in and take it for a tenth of what it's worth. I think we are encouraging oil and gas properties and operators to consider like-kind exchange, where you can trade your investment asset for a beach house or a commercial property, and that there are a lot of different kind of trades that can happen. They don't have to be where you're just divesting completely. And where TalkTexasOil wants that message out there, I as a landman and working in real property, have the ability to trade in real estate, and it's so hard to communicate that, oil and gas is real property, and is able to trade, even though it's subsurface, even though, you usually think of your homes and your beach houses and your commercial buildings being surface property, that oil and gas is really like the same thing in that regard, of the ability to trade, and where we can make it much simpler in that, and then you can have that deferment, which Byron, being an accountant, can know. But there's a lot of speculation always, is the price of oil and gas rises and falls. Who's going to be knocking on my door? Who's going to want to be the vulture sitting there waiting on me? And you don't have to be in that environment or have that fear when you're working with Simon Energy or TalkTexasOil, as we're working with them, is you're dialoguing about what your property is.
Now, I'm just going to back up for just a second here in case anybody may be wondering what the heck we're talking about here, because there were some changes that happened, and so there might be some people that can participate and not even know it. I know when I looked into this, I believe the change happened early December, but I had always looked at real property as, land and structures, buildings, real estate, the traditional real estate that a realtor would sell, so to speak, not a landman or landwoman, excuse me. So I guess, do you know the update on that, what I'm talking about, and just kind of maybe give an overview of where we're at when it comes to the 1031s for the layman out there?
Well, I'm officially a retired CPA, so I'm not allowed to give tax advice. But oil and gas, mineral rights, leasehold have been considered real property for a long time. And they've always been subject to a approved like-kind exchange. And sometimes you do reverse 1031s or three-corner. A more common thing is what they call a three-corner trade, where someone is selling and they want the cash, or they want to do a 1031 and the cash goes to somebody else, and the buyer ends up with the property. And those three-corner trades are quite common in 1031 exchanges. But it's the reason why the like-kind exchange was put in the Internal Revenue Code to begin with is because someone who has a piece of raw land and he sells it to a developer, he's going to have a capital gain and he wants to put it into another property. So if the like-kind exchange, tax-free exchange wasn't available, he was going to have to pay taxes, then turn around and buy that land that he wanted to go to, and that's his trade or business, buying raw land, speculate for development. He was going to have to buy it with after-tax dollars, which would make it more expensive. And by doing the like-kind exchange, when he sells out to a developer his land and he sees another property he wants to buy, he can do what they call a three-corner trade and convert the sales proceeds from the one he's selling into the acquisition payment for that property he's buying, and it not be taxed. So, it just makes sense why penalize somebody, because if you didn't have that provision, you'd never want to sell anything. You would have an incentive not to sell because you're speculating in raw land, because you would always be paying taxes every time you do a transaction, and it would just raise your cost of doing business. In other words, creating taxable income with no cash to pay the taxes, or you would have to carve out enough to pay the taxes. And so the government saw this as a solution to that problem, and it gives everybody an incentive, because eventually they're going to get their money from the developer or whoever, whatever, when they go out and sell it to the final buyer, and they will pay that tax, and sooner or later. So it's not like the government's giving them something, but it is an incentive for transactions to be done that create value, create wealth that will eventually be taxed. And that's the whole concept behind the like-kind exchange. And the government has not changed that. Now they have made it more difficult to do a like-kind exchange with the rules compared to what it was, 30, 40 years ago. But it's still very popular and still very useful, and you really see it in raw land, farmland, ranch land, that sort of thing, where there's no cash to pay the taxes. And
I used to see it, like I say, occasionally it would pop up in like a old shopping mall or something. I don't even know if it ever got done. But back when I kind of had the real estate license, I had my real estate license for 3 years back in a former life. And one thing I do remember though is I don't think you can be a relative, and I know a realtor can't do it. So who actually does the 1031 exchanges? I mean, is that, you got to hire an attorney for that, or Kimberly, are you doing those, or who's doing them these days?
You have to have what is known as a qualified intermediary. The qualified intermediary is someone who controls the cash, has control of the cash, and directs the cash so that the buyer, the seller, never receives ownership or possession of the cash from the sale, and directs it, and it's generally in a three-corner trade to the proper space it belongs. There's companies that are basically, that's all they do, are 1031 exchanges as a qualified intermediary. So it's quite common. We've done a lot of them ourselves, been involved in a lot of them ourselves with sellers that we've represented. And like we did one, the most recent, we haven't done any during the COVID, but prior to that we did one summer of 2019, and it worked. It went real well. In fact, our seller decided at the last minute to do a 1031. We were closing on a Friday, and we agreed on a Thursday night. And the qualified intermediate was Dallas. The buyer was in Houston. Our group is in San Antonio area, and the seller was up here in Lubbock, Texas. And we handled all the paperwork, created the agreements and everything. That morning, got the transaction closed, and by the time I returned to Midland, my commission was in my bank account. So it is easy to do, and it's quite popular, and it was beneficial to that farmer who was selling his minerals.
But it is the ability for you to look around, put your property up for sale, make that transaction, then look around for something that's very diverse in the whole marketplace in the U.S., to look at another commercial area, to look at another residential area, and allows you to kind of, where oil and gas sometimes gets very stuck on what their complete assets are. And we are so into what we do every day that we don't often look up and go, oh, hey, how about, going out on the East Coast and looking for that beach house and doing that trade right there where that real estate may have equal value and have a place where our family can go for a little while. Yeah. So we think about, what our production's going to be over time, and we think about those things, but we may want to think, okay, let's exchange that for some family time or something for our kids and grandkids. So there's so many different ways to think about what you want to do with your assets in life. And one of the reasons that we asked Simon Energy to do this is we know that they go to vet their properties out, and they work very hard through the title, as well as all the analytics that are happening for your property to be where it needs to be when it's going to go to sell. And that's extraordinarily valuable.
Well, for me, the thing that I like is, we used to talk about these back, like I said, in a former life when I had a real estate license. I didn't practice a lot, but this was always something that seemed to come up as one of the options. And anytime you got another option, whether you use it or not is irrelevant. It's nice to have options. And
yes,
a lot of times these just work down to the sheer numbers too for a lot of things. I mean, if you can save or figure out a way not to pay taxes on $250,000, well, that's pretty good. And a lot of times these things allow that. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know.
Well, and you've seen some like kind of exchanges well into the 8 figures, 9 figures, and that are done. And of course, the ultimate is the corporate reorganization where they do swap paper, and that's a form of a like kind exchange. It's tax free. It's not called a 1031. It's under the corporate tax provisions where it's a non-taxable transaction where somebody swaps paper and they merge. And because there's no cash to pay the taxes, so they don't want to. The government does not want to prohibit these transactions from taking place. So there's a concept behind it, which is very important. It's to avoid a situation where you have taxable income and no cash to pay taxes.
Yes.
The government tries to avoid that, and the taxpayer wants to avoid that, and that's what the like kind or tax-free exchanges in all aspects that are available to buyers and sellers of real property. So it's something to be considered, and I agree. And there's several areas where you're probably going to see growth in this. Airbnb is causing a lot of that to take place, and there'll be other things like that will result in like kind exchanges and so forth. So, and they, there's also these Delaware statutory trusts. I'm not familiar with all of them, but that's a new thing that's come out, and that enables a like kind exchange. There's a lot of things to look into, and of course, I want to encourage everybody to talk to your tax accountant or tax attorney that can help you, that's qualified to give you that kind of advice, because I'm certainly not. And
But we do want to pitch as conceptually new ways for oil and gas producers as they're looking at their portfolios, that this is something to consider along the way.
Well, how can people get in touch with you guys then if they got more questions?
Well, they can reach me at SimonEnergy.com.
Yeah, TalkTexasOil.net.